Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, I'm going to continue our series of training post-Islamic psychology, and we are talking about Islam, heart of love, and we are discussing the topic of consciousness. And in my previous video, I explained to you how we have this similarity between the concept of Panpsychism and Wahhabism. And because Panpsychism now is getting a lot of exposure and getting a lot of following, especially among the biologists, scientists, neuroscientists, quantum physicists, and so many of them, because they cannot understand, and they already understood that there is a hard problem of consciousness, need something beyond just the physical plane, but they cannot separate the physicality. So the emergent property of consciousness as they see it is from bottom up. That means the building block of consciousness, which is already in existence in the universe, came from the basis of the building blocks that's already there. That means, what are these building blocks? These are the physical matter, energy, and so on. So if you look at the panpsychist idea of the world, consciousness, their idea of consciousness, comes from the building block. Plus, and then you have a building block, and then you get the emergent property of consciousness. So what are those building blocks? So they see this as, for example, energy, subatomic particles, spin, the forces of nature, like for example, the four forces of nature, electromagnetism. So they are combining. When they combine together, they become more complex. So this complex item then become conscious, and the whole thing become a unity in terms of consciousness. So that's where Panpsychism see things, everything has consciousness, and simple forces, whether it's an electron spin, whether it is quarks, all right, the up and down spin, whether it is electromagnetism, whether it is weak nuclear, strong nuclear force, even dark energy, they combine together to create a complex, and this complex is conscious. So it's no more physical, even though the building block come from what we call the physical world, all right, because they cannot run away from the reality that everything is conscious in that sense. From the Islamic perspective, everything is conscious because it comes from the will of God, which we will go into the Islamic metaphysics and Islamic nature of consciousness, inshallah, in a few videos later on. So this is Panpsychism. This is Panpsychism. We have also within, very, very popular now, is AI. So you have AI, artificial intelligence. And within AI, from Panpsychism, there are many schools now who are saying that we can create artificial sentience. That means we can create artificial consciousness. So if we take the building block from AI, we have algorithm. That means we have the computer system. We have the computer system, all right, and we have the algorithm, all right. And if we can make it complex enough, just like the same thing, you have a big complex enough, all right, this whole thing becomes what we call artificial sentience, ataupun or artificial intelligence, AI. So this is another understanding of the so-called misuse of Panpsychism, but also because now we are talking about robots, we are talking about cyborgs, we are talking about human brain interaction and so on. But definitely, from the perspective of the nature of consciousness, it is non-existent. Because these are physical matter, computers are physical matter, silicon, algorithm, these are the work of mathematics or computer programming is a language. So if you combine the two and you get very, very complex, that it becomes Even, for example, in terms of usage, it is more intelligent than human mind in terms of, for example, dexterity, in terms of being able to spot, because they can put all kind of cameras. You can spot 1 mile up, 10 mile up. They have the AI intelligence for facial recognition, and so on and so on. But it is not conscious. So the whole idea that from simple building block, from the basic idea of panpsychism, you can develop artificial intelligence that finally has this whole quality of consciousness. So this whole quality of consciousness is an upward movement of the idea of so-called the new age or the new civilization and so on. Okay, so what is important is for Muslims, we know that consciousness is willed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it is his attributive aspect. As I say, within the schools of Kalam, within the school of Ahli Sunnah wal Jama'ah, Ash'ari, Maturidi, metaphysics, which we'll get into more detail, we have a far coherent, beautiful aspect of the nature of consciousness. Because nature of consciousness includes will, includes intelligence, includes communication, and includes all the various attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which He manifested. So the attributive aspect of Allah, we have His Zat, His essential nature, and we have His attributes, is manifested, and one of those manifestations as we see in this physical world is consciousness. And how it operates and so on, inshallah, we'll give a better detail. But we are not panpsychists, we are not the so-called AI cyborg type of people. So these two are errors in thinking, which we Muslims, as we face the challenges of more panpsychists and the AI, proponent of AI, artificial intelligence, who says that they finally will create a being with the come from silicon chips and so on, that has sentient, that has feelings, that have love, that have a heart. It is not possible. You can create a so-called algorithm for love, but that love is very artificial. Alright, that love, it can communicate with you as if it is love, but it is not love. It is just an algorithm with no sense of the feeling of love. There is no love there. For example, you can program when you touch, I feel I'm being loved. Say a cyborg. You create a cyborg and you touch, I love you and you love me. So when you touch, this sensor that has this idea of touch, the petting and whatever it is, to the cyborg, and then the cyborg will say, oh, you touch me, then I have within my algorithm say, I love you. And then they can have the eye movement. They can even program the eye movement to show love, the lips, the face, and so on, the awe, the wonder, the whatever. But those are just programmed within sensors, using sensors. So those sensors are making the face smile, making the face happy, making the face loving, caring, but it is not real. So this is not consciousness. It is not sentience, being able to appreciate the whole concept of love, the whole concept of mercy, compassion, and so on. So those things are beyond artificial intelligence. And also within the whole idea of panpsychism, this building block cannot happen, because from the simple to the complex, there must be a force to act this, to combine them together so that it become conscious. So if there is no force, you cannot have that. So consciousness must come from top down. That means from outside in. So it must be self-existent before even the whole idea of from the simple to the complex can exist. Because all of it, from the perspective of Islam, exists in the mind of Allah. The consciousness that He manifested as one of His attributive aspects. And inshallah, we will go into more detail to understand that. So we Muslims, from the perspective of metaphysics, has a very powerful understanding of the nature of consciousness, which is now is a science, is getting more and more deep. So it is very important, like for example, young people to study, as I say, the metaphysics of Islam, because we are talking about consciousness, the nature of life, the nature of death, the nature of existence, the realm of the spiritual, whatever. Because now you're open. Once you say that consciousness is fundamental, then you're open to the spiritual world. You're open to the nature of God, who is God. Because even Panpsychism says this, if this matter is then becoming complex and become conscious, it is something like a mind of God or universal consciousness, which they accept. But the way forward towards it is from bottom up. From Islam, it is self-evident, self-existent, from the attributive aspect of Allah, which is eternal. Alright? So we can understand that, and we also can understand why these AI people who want to bring cyborg and so-called new being with artificial intelligence using algorithm and computers and so on, they can only simulate the outward look of that, outward look of love, but there's no real love. Silicon cannot feel love. Alright? There's no feeling there. It is just an algorithm working, duplicating in a very inferior form of what you call consciousness. So there will be not possible for this to happen. So we don't have to worry about that, inshallah. This is a misplaced argument, because from physicalism, they have no answer to the hard problem of consciousness, so they move to Panpsychism. So there's lots and lots of, as I say, in the scientist community, there's dumping materialism and physicalism, moving to Panpsychism. So it is our duty then as Muslims to bring them up towards the understanding of the metaphysics of Islam, because we can overcome all these problems. And that needs intelligent young Muslims, scholars, ustaz, teachers who understand, going back to our tradition, going back to the tradition that was brought about by our Holy Prophet Muhammad SAW and all the great scholars, all the great Imam, including all the 4 Imams, Imam Ash'ari, Imam Mutridi and so on, bringing this idea of consolidating this concept of understanding the nature of existence, which is consciousness, and the nature of the creator of everything that exists, which is from the perspective of Tawheed. So we have this Tawheedic perspective. All we need to make sure is that this Tawheedic perspective does not become Panpsychism, because it's very dangerous. As I mentioned to you, if you believe that Allah has hand, has face, has head, physically, then you are putting parts to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just like the Panpsychists. Alright, so we have to correct those brothers and sisters, especially Wahhabism, who takes this type of thinking. And we hope, even though their argument is slightly different, but what is important is for us to bring about an understanding of the nature of consciousness that is not only rational, scientific, but can take up the test of time. So more than 1,400 years, this idea of Tawheed within the framework of the Quran and the Sunnah have stood the test of time. Even there were challenges by many philosophies, Greek philosophies, Hindu philosophies, and many other philosophies, but that truth is there. That's why Allah tells us, وَقُلْ جَالْ حَقُّ وَزَحَكَ الْبَاطِلِ إِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ كَانَ زَهُوقًا. Truth has come, and truth shall, and falsehood will perish, for surely truth will overwhelm falsehood. So it is important for Muslims to have this inner understanding of the psychology of consciousness, especially as we meet many young people now who has taken up Panpsychism as their belief system. Instead of materialism, they are taking this, and many of those computer geek who is taking up as AI as a way forward, as a belief system now. So you have, as I say, these are belief system now, just like they have a religion of AI, a religion of Panpsychists. But we, from the perspective of Islam, must be able to bring about a beautiful understanding of the nature of consciousness and the reality and the nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as much as we can bring about, so that it becomes a living religion that draws more and more people who think, because Allah created us as a thinking creature for us to reflect and think about the nature of our existence, we service the nature of God, and how we can fulfill our servanthood, our life on this earth as a servant and the vicegerent of God on this earth. Always striving to make ourselves good, helping others to be good, and making the world good, inshallah.